Hello and welcome listeners to Women Leading Change. This is a podcast series launched by the Sahel and West Africa Club, SWAC Secretariat at the OECD. That's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Here we tell the stories of inspiring, transformative change makers from across West Africa, including civil society actors, activists, authors, politicians, traders, business leaders, and more who happen to be women. We use these conversations to help us better connect SWAC's evidence-based analysis with real advocacy and action. I am your host, Dr. Lena Coney Hoffman. Our Women Leading Change today is Ndidi Nwuneli. Ndidi is an expert on African agriculture and nutrition, entrepreneurship, social innovation, and youth development. She has over 25 years of international development experience and is a recognized serial entrepreneur, author, public speaker, and consultant. She serves on boards in almost too many organizations to count, including the Rockefeller Foundation, the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition, AGRA, the Young Global Leaders of the World Economic Forum, and several others. Ndidi was also recently appointed the CEO of the One Campaign. Congratulations, Ndidi, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's a delight to be on the show.
Excellent. And I'm so very glad to have you in particular on the show speaking about gender and food systems. But before we get into issues of food systems and nutrition and gender as well, we like to start off the podcast with guests' backstories. So, if you don't mind, Ndidi, could you tell us how you became interested in food and nutrition issues?
Thank you so much again. So I grew up in Enugu, Nigeria, and attended the Federal Government College, Enugu. And agriculture was my favorite subject in high school. I was fortunate to have a small garden in my backyard on the campus, and really enjoyed engaging in the food and agriculture landscape. However, as many Africans know, this was not a career or a subject that was well regarded. So when I moved to the US, I went to the Wharton School and opted, instead of going to Cornell, where I got into the School of Agriculture and Life Sciences, to go to the Wharton School and pursue business. But I was confronted with this face of Africa. The face of Africa that I met in the US was a hungry child. When you think of people as hungry people, you don't think they have agency, you don't think they have the ability to transform their own lives, and you actually neglect that they have some of the best food ecosystems in the world, a great culinary heritage, and a wonderful current role in the food ecosystem. And so I committed my life to serving as a change agent in this ecosystem, not only by starting my own businesses, but inspiring and empowering others to do the same and to scale their work across Africa.
That's really just a powerful statement there. When you think about hungry people as just hungry people, you take away their agency. And I think we're going to be talking a bit more about human agency and just the complexity of West African and African food ecosystems in a little bit as we just dive into talking about diets, specifically diets in West Africa. So a recent report from SWAC on healthy diets, costs and food policies in the Sahel and West Africa highlights how high cost of food is a key barrier to accessing a healthy diet for a large portion of West Africa's population. Stunting, wasting, overweight, and obesity are some of the associated health challenges with limited access to healthy diets, as well as the high costs and unaffordability of these healthy diets. Ndidi, in your view, how can we transform food systems to better support the availability, accessibility, and affordability of healthy diets in West Africa. What do you think should be the priority of policymakers in food system transformation?
So, in terms of the challenges around healthy diets, I think there are four main challenges. The first is that unfortunately we've neglected our indigenous foods, which were historically very healthy, and shifted to more calorie dense, imported food products and varieties. And as a result, we're actually losing some of our most natural, healthy indigenous foods.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the diet of the average West African 30 years ago and the diet today, you'll see a shift from lentils and beans and leafy vegetables, roots and tubers that are indigenous to our local ecosystem, to a very heavy starch, rice, bread based diet. Now that creates a complexity because wheat is largely imported into West Africa for bread, and so is rice. Even though West Africa could be self-sufficient in rice, we have become net importers of rice. And
That's
so
correct.
when you see that shift in the caloric composition of our diets and the neglect of our indigenous food groups, it also not only makes it more difficult to engage, but it also makes it quite challenging when it comes to the cost of the food, because you're dependent on imports, commodities that you do not control. And where there's macroeconomic instability, a pressure on foreign exchange, you see, unfortunately, farmers in other parts of the world getting richer and our farmers getting poorer. So that leads me to the first policy recommendation, which is an urgent commitment to local food, locally sourced meals. And I've actually recommended that many of our countries pattern our policies around Brazil, where there's a local food content mandated for public procurement for any interventions that are around government school feeding programs or refugee feeding programs. And this applies not just to our government initiatives at the federal and state levels, but our foreign donor interventions when it comes to the World Food Program or any countries that are coming to support food insecurity. The mandate should be local sourced food first and indigenous food first, because there has to be demand for farmers to invest in these crops. And unfortunately, even in the World Food Program procurement list, our indigenous foods are not included. And so we continue to disadvantage our farmers where we're trying to feed our people. So for me, this is a sense of urgency and it's a priority. The second key issue is that we have to improve the productivity of our farmers. Our farmers still use largely seeds that are not certified or improved seeds. And we also don't use enough inputs, fertilizer, crop protection products, even in the genre of regenerative agriculture, healthy soils and high yielding varieties that are drought resistant, that are climate tolerant, and not well dispersed. And so we need to invest in our agro-dealer networks, our extension support services to ensure that our farmers have access to amazing inputs that will triple their yields, and that we support them through appropriate financing, technical support, and market linkages so that when they've tripled their yields, they have access to markets. And that we also invest in post-harvest management so that we reduce the high rates of post-harvest losses. In many of our contexts, 20 to 30% of our grains go to waste, 40 to 60% of our vegetables go to waste, and climate change is not helping. The heat is we've had unprecedented heat waves over the last 3 months in West Africa. And our crops are not heat resistant, especially when our farmers don't have access to the right inputs. So that's critical. And there's a role for public policy around creating an enabling environment for agro-dealer networks, for farmer support, and for market linkages. And then the third thing is really consumer awareness. I really believe that ultimately consumers have to be educated about what a healthy diet is. And we have to be equipped with the knowledge, the skills and tools to prioritize healthy diets. There's a big divide between what is considered fashionable and cool. Fast food is considered fashionable and cool. Indigenous meals are no longer considered fashionable and cool. And through my work with Sahel Consulting and with African Food Changemakers and AACE Foods, we're doing a lot of education about where people can source healthy food, how SMEs can benefit from investing in the production of affordable and nutritious food, and supporting players across the value chain to make sure that our food is affordable and accessible, but also healthy for our people.
Those are excellent recommendations, and they come through in a very crisp fashion. The emphasis that you place on indigenous foods makes me wonder, based on your work with the Sahel, with your consultancy, how we reimagine how consumers see these indigenous food groups. I agree with you. A lot of our lentils and our beans, lots of things that grow, and ancient grains and so on that have grown in the region for hundreds and thousands of years even, are not very fashionable. They're not very appealing to kind of cosmopolitan tastes. So just I wonder, what are the levers besides kind of policy levers? What are the kind of social, what kind of other levers besides kind of government facing or internal to government do you think, need to be activated to kind of just shift the way West African populations, young in particular, urban, think about, ancient grains, ancient food groups?
So we're doing a couple of things. Through African Food Changemakers, which is a nonprofit, we're telling positive stories about our food, and we're curating events that put our food at the forefront. And so we've created podcasts on a range of food products from West Africa and from across Africa. And I'll give you a few examples. Okra is an Igbo word. Okra is a vegetable that's enjoyed all over the world. But most people don't know that when they say that word okra, it's actually my language, right? Mm-hmm. And this is, such an important crop and such a nutritious crop. So educating people about the origins and the sources and uses, and making them proud that they have contributed such an important narrative to the global food ecosystem is critical. And you see that not just with teff and rooibos and okra and coffee and cocoa, but it's also our quinoa better equivalent, which is fonio.
Yes.
And we've been partnering with people like Chef Pierre Thiam, and Chef Pierre actually got to make fonio salad with Bill Gates on the goalkeeper's stage during hunger. During the Canex in Egypt, we actually had Jollof Wars, where we had chefs from Senegal and Ghana and Nigeria compete on the best jollof rice, using their own indigenous spices and condiments, and it was just an amazing thing to see the world celebrate jollof. We've also done a jollof documentary, which is called The Jollof Wars, which talks about the history of African rice, West African rice, and all the approaches to creating this amazing product called jollof rice. So storytelling is key. Putting the content out there for people to embrace it is key, but also having those demonstrations and elevating our cuisine on a global stage is critical. Beyond that, what we've also started to do is support SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises across the ecosystem that are committed to not only processing, but packaging high-quality indigenous foods that are affordable and accessible. And many of them are using wonderful, forgotten food. And I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. One of our entrepreneurs produces okwa. Okwa is a very, very nutritious ancient grain. And the okwa snacks, okwa flour. Okwa, I mean, it's breadfruit. The English word is breadfruit, but in Igbo it's
Yes.
called okwa. And we've taken her on trade shows across Africa and across the world. AACE Foods, the company I co-founded, produces a great snack called Jara Crunch, which uses beans flour, cowpea flour, cassava flour, and it's like an amazing snack for kids, and it's at a very affordable price point. So supporting SMEs that are producing snacks, foods, complementary foods from locally sourced produce that is nutritious and affordable is amazing, and helping them scale, helping them trade, helping them access markets and get on local and global shelves has been a key component of what African Food Changemakers does. Beyond that, Sahel Consulting works with dairy communities across northern Nigeria, and we work with the female self-help groups to introduce a range of leafy vegetables and bean products so that they can grow alongside their dairy production to ensure that they have nutritious food, but they could also feed their children and their communities. So we're doing it at multiple levels. It's working, but it needs to be scaled. And so for me, the conviction through African Food Changemakers, our vision is 1 million entrepreneurs that are not only scaling nutritious, resilient businesses, but are also changing global narratives through the work they do. And I'm very excited that we're now working with entrepreneurs in 40 African countries.
That is remarkable, and I do agree with you fully on just the power of storytelling when it comes to these indigenous ancient grains. I'm from central Nigeria, kind of the base of northern Nigeria, and I grew up eating acha. I know I resented eating acha as a child, but learning about acha, which is fonio, as an adult, it being gluten free, kind of just nutrient dense. I have been experimenting with acha for my family. I'm a friend, I know Pierre Tiam as well. So it's just really remarkable how various actors in the food ecosystem, chefs, creators, and the like, content creators as well, are reimagining how we engage with all of these food groups and different foods and ways in which Africans have eaten and eaten well and eaten healthily. I want to I want to get your thoughts on women's diets in West Africa. So we really get your perspective on, diets for women through different stages of their reproductive life. So just in terms of the nutritional needs that women have, particularly during pregnancy and breastfeeding, women typically face increased costs of nutrient adequate diets. At the same time, we know that women have fewer financial resources than men. They have less autonomy over household financial decisions, and often, unfortunately, have no income at all. What kinds of policies or protection mechanisms would you think should be implemented to ensure access to affordable, healthy diets for women and girls? How do we address that challenge, that the nutritional needs of women and girls in West Africa?
Thank you. So that's a very important issue, and there are three levers. The first one is really what many countries have already started to do, which is the mandatory food fortification policies, where processors of these commodities I've talked about, flour, oil, salt, are required to put, in some cases, iodine, in other cases, vitamin A, in other cases, iron into these products. And it's mandatory for the producers and processors of flour and oil and sugar and salt, as I mentioned. What we don't see across the board is compliance at the right levels. or the right packaging to ensure that when these products are exposed to sunlight, they don't lose the vitamin A, for example, which is very susceptible to sunlight. And so lots of actors, including Sahel Consulting, have been working on the right enabling policies and measures to ensure that private sector meets these mandatory fortification commitments, because that's one way to ensure that people get nutrition, especially when women face low iron deficiency or anemia during pregnancy or childbirth.
Yeah.
The second is really the importance of providing access to affordable, accessible, nutritious food. And one of the things I've stressed already is the importance of small and medium-sized enterprises across the board being supported with innovation and financing and enabling environment to not only process food locally, but to distribute it across the country. And oftentimes in many of our countries, we face quite a bit of backlash and a hostile operating environment for SMEs. And SMEs are the hidden but most important components of our food ecosystem, and we need to support them to scale. And then the third for me is really the importance of incorporating nutrition education and incentives in primary care in all of our countries. And I'll use Nigeria as an example. We have 774 local governments. Each of these local governments has a primary healthcare center, right? In the prenatal, antenatal care provision, nutrition is incorporated, but incentives for women to actually come for these training programs and to be taught how to produce high quality food in their homes and how to grow some of these foods in their homes through community gardens. And I'm excited to say that there are quite a few initiatives. We're partnering with a few players like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They have a whole program around nutrition education, but also through our programs, we're introducing support services and linkages. For example, if you introduce a chicken, a high-producing broiler bird, to each of these women, that bird can produce 20 eggs a week, right? Eggs are a very good source of nutrition, not just for the woman, but also for her children. If you teach her how to have a community garden and extend the right variety of seeds to her, then she becomes a producer of vegetables, not just for herself, but for her community. And so there are many interventions that are around a comprehensive approach to ensure that women have access to nutritious food that's healthy, but also empowers them to become entrepreneurs and to become actors in the nutrition value chain as well. Beyond that, I think we have to introduce nutrition education back into our schools. I was shocked. I was recently in Benin Republic, and I found out that agri education and nutrition education has been excluded from school curriculum. At least in Nigeria, it's still part of our curriculum, but in some African countries, it's been excluded. And where agriculture is our natural endowment as a region, every child should know a bit about the agribusiness landscape and about nutrition. So please, education is critical and it has to be mandatory.
That's correct. Yeah. I do concur. I do agree with that. And I think the issue you raise about empowering women, economically empowering them with credits, with empowering them with inputs, is a very, very crucial role, a crucial one, and reflects, the vital role that women play and can play in food systems. So I want to turn your attention.
Can I just add one thing? So through our Leading Women in Food Fellowship that the African Food Change Makers launched, we actually select women who are already leading in this area. We select women who are storytellers, who are chefs, who are disruptors, who are ecosystem enablers, who are funders. Many of them are leading the charge on nutrition for women. And we select them from across Africa, and over 6 months, we support them to amplify their work and voices. And it's been one of the most gratifying programs I've launched. And I'm so proud of my leading women. And many of them, I think, need to be featured on your show because they have such great stories.
Oh, absolutely. Any recommendations you have, we're more than happy to have them on the show. And I think you've already sort of leaned into the final question I was going to ask you, which was around women's agency and leadership. So, how can we strengthen women's agency and leadership so they can contribute to food system growth and transformation? I know you spoke about programs that you're involved in. Maybe another extension of that is maybe how can we kind of build coalitions among business leaders such as yourself, entrepreneurs, disruptors, so that we kind of create that critical mass. So it's not just kind of small scale empowerment of women, but we're actually making a dent for gender equality, a dent for promoting women in leadership on all levels.
Terrific. Yeah, so that's exactly why I started the Leading Women in Food Fellowship. I found that in so many rooms, I was one of the few. And we were the same numbers being called into every global conversation and local leadership conversation. And I realized, my gosh, we need to elevate more voices. There are so many amazing African women working on different components of the value chain. So last year, I launched the Leading Women in Food Fellowship. And the vision is a community of sisters who are working across different aspects of the value chain. Some of them are policymakers, some of them are chefs and cooks and storytellers, photographers, videographers, all the way down to the farmers. And we've created this community, and it's a formidable force. The first year, we selected 27 women out of 630 nominations. This year, we've selected 31 women. And you say the numbers are small, but these are women who are leaders already in their ecosystem. And what are we doing? We're providing them with the skills, the tools, the support, the training, the mentorship, and the visibility to not only increase their impact and enhance their visibility, but also together raise the bar on the issues that women face. And they're serious issues. The gender gap is very persistent, not just in the food ecosystem, but across the board, right? And we need gender equity in our continent because this is critical for our continent's growth, transformation, and impact. And so what I've been so delighted to see is women from different countries getting to know each other, building a strong bond, supporting each other, and rising together.
That's really just so excellent to hear. And I'm gladdened to hear about the investments that you are making in collaboration with so many others in women's solidarity. And I agree, women supporting women, we all win when that is the case. It's been absolutely delightful speaking with you. Thank you for bringing such crisp clarity and insights, valorizing, locally sourced meals, indigenous foods, just the emphasis you've made on storytelling and how we can reimagine and educate consumers. Thank you so very much for highlighting, the needs of women and how we can address this through policy, through education, through investment. This has really just been an excellent discussion of various aspects of food ecosystems in West Africa. I know there is so much more that we could speak about and so many more actors that we can bring to the table. So I look forward to, us having conversations with a lot of the young women that you are inspiring and you are working with, who are the future of food, the future of the continent. So thank you so very much for joining us this today, Ndidi.
Thank you so much for having me, and take good care.